Okay, welcome everybody, and welcome, of course, Michael, with
Mm.
us. Long time, I think,
Mm.
last time we had you with us, and the topic is self-investigation and happiness. I was thinking that happiness is quite maybe challenging word because, I mean, normally we think about it as the opposite of unhappiness or misery or some kind of a state of mind. And but of course, in this case, it means much more. But as a word, like compared to bliss, peace, and word stillness, it's
Mm.
can be challenging. But uh, depending on how we take it to be, of course, and everybody
Yeah.
wants to be happy or experience happiness. So I thought this might be a good subject to relate self-investigation to happiness and what are they, how are they related to? So that was the idea. So if you'd like to say something about what how they relate and what Bhagavan says about this happiness and self-investigation relation.
Right. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Ramanaya Namaskaram. Um, yes. Um, our desire for happiness, which is what drives all our actions, ultimately driven by our desire for happiness. Um, it's the ultimate motivation for whatever we do. And Bhagavan has pointed out, but happiness is our real nature. So the only way to experience infinite happiness eternally is to know and to be what we actually are. But one of the principal works of Bhagavan's teachings is Nana. Who am I? Uh, it was originally a set of questions and answers. That is, a devotee called Shiva Prakasham Pillai asked Bhagavan a series of questions. That was in the very early days, about 1901 or so, when Bhagavan would have been about 21 years old. And Shiva Prakasham Pillai was also a young man. He asked Bhagavan a series of questions, very pertinent questions to Bhagavan's teaching. The first question he asked was, Swami, who am I? Which is was shows how well attuned he was to Bhagavan, even without knowing that that was the reason why Bhagavan had appeared on earth in human form. So he asked a series of questions and answers. He noted down Bhagavan's answers. In those days, Bhagavan wasn't talking much, so many of his answers he would have written just in the sand, on the sandy ground, or on a slate with a chalk, or sometimes on pieces of paper. That those questions and answers were unknown to anyone for many, many years. Only in about 1923, when Shiv Prakasham Pillai's nephew published a poem that Shiv Prakasham Pillai had written, Sri Ramana Charita Ahval. That's a biography of Bhagavan in verse form. He included in it these some of these questions and answers that Shiv Prakasham Pillai had asked. That it was only then that people came to know about this work. A few years, and so subsequently it was published as a separate book consisting of 30 questions and answers and some miscellaneous sayings of Bhagavan. A few years later, maybe around about 1926 or 27, Bhagavan, of his own accord, rewrote it in the form of an essay. And when he rewrote it in the form of an essay, he added one paragraph, which wasn't part of the original question and answers. That is the first paragraph. And that paragraph is a very fitting introduction to Bhagavan's teachings. And it is about happiness. What he says in that paragraph is it's a short paragraph. It consists of just two sentences. The first sentence is quite a long one, but contains many very important ideas. What he says is, since all sentient beings like to be always happy without what is called misery, that's the first reason. So we all like to be happy. Since for everyone, the greatest love is only for oneself, and since happiness alone is the cause for love, in order to obtain that happiness, which is one's swabhava, one's own being or nature, which one experiences daily in sleep, which is devoid of mind, oneself knowing oneself is necessary. That's the first sentence. And the second sentence is, for that, jnana vichara, called who am I, alone is the principal means. So I will explain this in a little bit more detail. That is, he begins with the first sentence with 3 since clauses. So these are all giving reason. This is a logical argument Bhagavan is giving. Of course, Bhagavan doesn't need any logical arguments for himself because this was his experience. But because our experience seems to be something different, he gives logical arguments to help us to understand the reason for what he teaches us. So he starts by saying, since all jivas means sentient beings, that's not only human beings, sentient beings of all kinds, since all sentient beings like to be always happy without what is called misery. That is one thing we are all seeking is happiness. And here some people who don't think very deeply. They say, "Oh no, I'm not looking for happiness. It's not my happiness I'm concerned about." That is, they are thinking in terms of pleasure. But happiness here is to be understood in the sense of satisfaction. That is, true satisfaction and happiness are actually synonymous. So whatever we do it to satisfy our desires, because when our desires are satisfied, we feel happy. When our desires are not satisfied, we feel unhappy. Our desires may be altruistic desires. We may think that we are working for the benefit of others, but still we are seeking our own satisfaction because we derive satisfaction from helping others, from feeling that we are doing good. So anyone who thinks about the matter deeply enough, we're all seeking satisfaction or happiness. And that is what drives every action we do. Every action of mind, speech, and body is ultimately driven by this desire for happiness. We may seem to desire so many things. We may desire money, we may desire name and fame, we may desire a peaceful life, we may desire learning, knowledge, so many things we may desire. But ultimately, why we desire those things? Because getting those things will satisfy us. And that satisfaction, that happiness that we derive from our desires being satisfied, that is ultimately what we're all seeking. So we're all seeking, we all like to be happy. We all, the verb he uses for like is virumbuvadu. Virumbuvadu means liking, loving, wanting. So we can translate it as since all living beings like to be always happy, or love to be always happy, or want to be always happy, they all amount to much the same. And he also, to emphasize the point, he says we want to be happy without what is called misery. That is the opposite of happiness. Sukha is dukkha, the dissatisfaction, discontent, suffering. That is the opposite of happiness. So we want to be free of that dukkha, and in its place we want to experience sukha. So this is our very nature. It's the nature of all sentient beings. And And the reason for this is because happiness is our real nature. But I'm jumping ahead of myself here. So he's giving reasons why, for us to understand why happiness is our real nature. Firstly, we all like to be happy. And then he says, since for everyone the greatest love is only for oneself. That is, whatever else we may love, we love ourselves more than we love any other thing. We love those things that we think will contribute to our happiness. So it's even when we love others, it is ultimately because of our love for ourselves that we love others. We love those who contribute to our happiness. So since for everyone the greatest love is only for oneself. This is our very nature to love ourselves. Of course, and self-love is not in itself a wrong thing, because what we actually are is infinite being, awareness, and happiness. So there's nothing selfish in the usual sense of understanding of the word selfish in loving ourselves. The selfishness arises when we limit ourselves as a particular person and therefore care only about this person more than other people. That is where the self-love gets distorted as love for this little person that we now mistake ourselves to be. So that's the second clause. Everyone has the greatest love only for oneself. And the third clause is, since happiness alone is the cause for love. That is, we love whatever contributes to our happiness, or whatever we believe can contribute to our happiness. So if anything makes us happy, or if we believe anything will make us happy, we love those things. And from this love arises all the desires and attachments and so on and so forth. So from these three arguments, firstly, we all want to be happy. Secondly, we have greatest love for ourselves. And thirdly, happiness alone is the cause of love. What we have to understand from this is, since happiness alone is the cause of love, and since we love ourselves more than we love anything else, that indicates that happiness is our real nature. We love ourselves because we are the ultimate source of happiness. And as Bhagavan explains later in the 14th paragraph, whatever happiness we seem to derive from other things actually is the happiness that is our own real nature. When we desire something other than ourselves, that desire is an agitation, a dissatisfaction. So that dissatisfaction is removed when our desire is fulfilled, and so we experience the happiness that is our own real nature. So these are the first three clauses. There's also another argument he gives, but not in a since clause, but in a slightly different way. He goes on to say, since, therefore, in order to attain that happiness, which is one's swabhava. Bhava means being or existence. Swabhava means own being or own existence. In other words, it's our own nature. It's what we actually are. That happiness is what we actually are. And then he gives another argument why this happiness is our swabhava, which one experiences daily in sleep. Here, sleep, nidra means it doesn't include dream. It's dreamless sleep. When we are fast asleep, in that state, when we do not experience anything else, we experience happiness. Why? Because happiness is our real nature. So he says, which one experiences daily in sleep, which is devoid of mind. Since there's no mind in sleep, there's nothing other than ourselves. We're not aware of anything other than ourselves in sleep, but we are happy. That is because happiness is our own real nature. In the state where we alone exist, without anything else, being unaware of anything other than ourselves, we are perfectly happy. what do we have to infer from that? That happiness is our real nature. Happiness is not something other than ourselves. It is what we actually are. That's why he says it's our swabhava. So, in order to obtain that happiness, which is one's swabhava, which one experiences daily in dreamless sleep, which is devoid of mind, oneself knowing oneself is necessary. Tanne tan aridalvendum. That is, we ourselves have to know ourselves. That is, we need to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. Because happiness is what we actually are. In order to experience that happiness, we need to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. And the happiness that we actually are is infinite and eternal. Because it's infinite, it's completely devoid of any misery. Because it's eternal, there's never a moment when we are not that. So in order to experience that infinite and eternal happiness, we need to know ourselves. In other words, we need to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. So how to be aware of ourselves as we actually are? In the second sentence, he says, adhaku. Adhaku means for that. Jnana vichara, called who am I, alone is the principal means. Jnana, here in this context, jnana means awareness. So jnana vichara means awareness investigation. That is what we, as he goes on to explain later on, what we essentially are is just awareness. And the nature of that awareness is Sat Chit Ananda. It is pure being, pure awareness, and pure happiness. So since awareness is what we actually are, what we need to investigate is this awareness. This not awareness of anything other than ourselves, but the awareness of our own being, the being awareness, Sat Chit, the awareness of our own being, I am. So that is what we need to investigate. So the awareness investigation called who am I? The word ennum it literally means called, but it's very idiomatic in Tamil to use that term. So, but it's not essential to translate it in English. We can simply say, for that awareness investigation, who am I? Alone is the principal means. Why does he refer to it as who am I? We are trying to know who or what is this I. This I is awareness. So investigating this I to know what it is awareness investigation. And this alone is the principal means for knowing ourselves. When he says it's a principal means, he doesn't intend to imply that there are alternative means. It is the principal means in the sense that if you have if all rivers flow into one main river, and that one main river is the only river that reaches the sea, that main river is the principal river. All other rivers are just tributaries. So in the same way, this is the principal path. Whatever other path we may follow, ultimately we need to come to this path in order to know and to be what we actually are, in order to experience the infinite happiness that we actually are. So have I explained that clearly enough?
Yes, I'm sure that's very good. And does Jeff or somebody have anything to add? Some questions or something?
I have tons of questions.
Okay.
I feel blessed, or I don't know, just that there's just a few of us and we can
Well,
talk and listen.
there'll be more probably when it's released anyway on the YouTube channel. But yeah, for some reason, Finnish people are lazy today, it seems.
I don't know. It's a blessing to me, so I'm very grateful. I mean, I'm in Montana in the United States, and I don't know if you're familiar with Gangama or Amma, who is David Godman just published a book about her,
We heard
and
about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been studying her teachings, and I've listened, and thank you so much, Michael, for all your work for all the years that you've been doing this. I just am so appreciative because it's made it easy. And David Godman too, just his book "Be As You Are," and then the book that you and Sadhu Om did, uh, the one,
Path of
the
Sri
eight chapter
Ramana.
one, and chapter eight is just speaks
Yeah.
volumes to me, and I'm so appreciative because I like around Montana, and where I live, there's just not a lot of people, and I try to share Bhagavan's teachings with others, and nobody really. It's very Christian, and they say, well, there's only one God, and it's Jesus, and they don't want to listen about self-inquiry, and then, but I just love inquiry in the practice, and like I said, I'm very grateful, and I don't know, blessed that there's so few of us, and we get to talk. So I'll quit talking about that, so I can ask you questions. My questions regard around the practice, because
Yes.
like and really and I'm getting I get into a place when I just really look to the source and where my thoughts are coming from, and then it says in even like, and I've studied that. I've studied Who Am I, the book, and I have the question version, and I've studied it along with your version, and they pretty much are saying the same things. You really get into the vocabulary and things, and I appreciate that because I can find pretty much, like when I was studying the book Who Am I with the 28 questions, and then I love how you explain how the happiness part wasn't included in the original questions and the whole story. And I get to go to Tiruvannamalai in February, and I'm so excited to see where all of this stuff happened, and I just am a really, and I'm becoming more devoted. I feel like I'm like caught in the jaws of the tiger or whatever,
Yes.
and so I guess my question is always around personal. I mean, what do you do? I mean, is it, do you let go of all, because you're supposed to eventually let go of everything that you know and realize that you don't know anything. And the real knowledge is that everything is Bhagavan, everything is God, and everything that happens, every experience. Bhagavan is the experience of all experiences, and that's what Amma says in her. And been studying. She has these 101 sutras that she published for free, and David Godman says the most highest teachings are always free, and he sold that book that for that Amma that about Amma for only $2, and he shipped it to me. So I don't know if there's a question in there. I'm just grateful that to be able to listen to you and not be on a video. So
You mentioned letting go, but how can we let go? The very nature of ego is to be always grasping something. So how can we let go of everything? The answer given by Bhagavan is we need not worry about letting go of other things. All we need to be concerned about is holding on to ourself. To the extent to which we hold on to ourself, we thereby let go of other things. Holding on to ourself means attending only to ourself, to our own being, I am. To the extent to which our attention is fixed on ourself, it is thereby automatically withdrawn from other things. So we don't have to, if we are trying to let go of things, our attention is on those things we are trying to let go of, and the attention itself is attachment. So rather than of course we have to let go of everything, but if we try to let go of everything, it's a self-defeating effort, because holding on in this context means attending to. So we can't cease it. If you try to cease attending to something, your attention is on that thing you're trying to cease attending to. So Bhagavan says, don't worry about letting go of anything. Don't worry about this neti. Just hold on to that which you actually are. If you hold on to what you actually are, everything that you are not will automatically drop down, because nothing is holding on to us. We are holding on to everything else. This body doesn't claim to be I. It's we as ego who says, I am this body. So we attach ourselves to this body, and we attach ourselves to so many things. This is my body. This is my wife, my children, my husband, my father, my mother, my nationality, my language, my religion, my this, my that. We have so many identifications, but they're all rooted in this primary identification: I am this body. That is the root attachment. So if we want to detach ourselves from these things, we have to hold on to what is real. Then all these unreal things will drop off.
And then I guess my question is, and I don't, has this happened for you? I mean, you've been doing it for so long.
Yes. Well, I mean, we have to continue doing it until we're no longer, until the doer is completely dissolved. That is, as Bhagavan explained, the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to things other than itself. But if that same ego turns its attention back on itself, it thereby subsides and dissolves back into its source. So we have to continue this practice until we dissolve completely in our source. Our source is our own being, the pure fundamental awareness I am. So we are all on the path. We just have to we need not when the goal is going to be reached need not concern us. If you're intent upon reaching a certain destination, all you have to do, you have to know the direction and follow and proceed in that direction. So long as you're going in the right direction, you will reach the goal sooner or later. Likewise on this path, all we have to do is to do our best to follow this path. And Bhagavan says, following this path, he defines what self-investigation, Atma-vichara, is by saying it is always keeping the mind fixed on oneself. The word he uses for always is a very strong word. He says sadakalamum. So our aim is to be constantly self-attentive. Almost all of us are failing. None of us are attending to ourselves all the time. But that is what we should be working towards. So let's not worry about when we're going to reach the goal, or whether this person has reached the goal or that person. That really doesn't matter. Whether anyone else has reached the goal or not is nothing to us. Because if you reach your goal, that doesn't help me. We each have to follow this path. So it's asking about whether this person has reached the goal or that person has reached the goal is a fundamental misunderstanding, because the truth is no person reaches the goal, because the goal is the dissolution of ego. When ego is dissolved, we no longer identify ourselves as I am a person. So we cannot say this person has reached the goal, that person has reached the goal. That really has no meaning. All the appearance of others appear only when we rise as ego. When we're in deep dreamless sleep, there are no others. But when we rise as ego in waking or dream, the world and all the other people, everything appears. So we need to give up being concerned about others. We need to be concerned about knowing, who am I? Of course, when our mind is going outwards and we're interacting with the world seems real. So of course we have to be concerned with others in the usual sense of the term. That is, if someone is suffering, we try to say some kind words or some consolation. So naturally we care for others, but ultimately the solution to all these problems is to know what we ourselves actually are. While we're dreaming, if we see someone suffering in our dream, we naturally try to help that person. But the greatest help we can do to solve all the suffering we see in a dream is to wake up from a dream. So this is our primary duty.
Amma says guru, grace, and the path are the same. And then she says awakening only happens, or she says, awaken only happens if there is a dream. And then she said, the dream ends when the dreamer is found.
Well, when the dreamer is found to be non-existent, that's the whole point. This dream seems to be real. That is, the dreamer of this dream is ourself. When we dream, we always experience ourselves as a person within the dream. So when we know what we actually are, the dreamer will thereby cease to exist, and therefore all dreams will cease to exist along with it. So that's why Bhagavan was always emphasizing that the root problem is ego. The false awareness, I am this person, I am this body. And because ego is a false awareness of ourself, it can be eradicated only by correct awareness of ourself as we actually are. That's why investigating ourselves and knowing and being what we actually are is essential. When we know what we actually are, we will know that ego never actually existed at all. Until then, we have to continue on this path.
I guess I'll do that then.
Yeah. Well, we have little choice. we either follow this path or we continue suffering in samsara as we have been doing for countless dreams, countless lives.
This
Thanks,
idea,
thank you very much. No, thanks.
This idea of this, or realization that all is really just a dream, it really blows away everything that we ever learned, thought, accepted about anything about creation, or I mean the whole history and everything about even ourselves.
Yeah,
just blown away because it has no meaning anymore. It's quite
exactly.
thin and dreamlike. So there's no reality anymore in it.
Yeah.
So
even if we don't accept this, we can continue living our life as if it's real. But one day this body is going to die. And when this body dies, it will all end like a dream.
Yes. I've been thinking quite a lot of this, the moment of death of the body, and and I'm quite sure there's, if not holding on to ourself firmly, there might be some kind of a panic or some kind of the fear of losing something, the attachments, my friend's wife or somebody like that.
Yeah.
And it's quite certain, even people who say, I'm not afraid of death, I think it's easy to say like that, but in that moment, I think it's natural to have some uncertainty at least.
Absolutely, because we all, by studying Bhagavan's teachings, we understand that this body is not what we actually are. But what is our experience now? Our experience is, I am this body. It is such a deeply rooted experience. So most of us evade the fear of death by, though we all know we're going to die, it somehow doesn't seem real to us. Bhagavan also pointed this out. He said, the fact that our own death never seems real to us it shows that we are something other than this body. We are something that is eternal. We can never die. So we because we are eternal, we take this body to be, though we all know at one level, but this body is going to die, we all live. Even old people who are nearing death, they're still living as if they're going to live forever. Still planning this or that, or concerned about this or that. Truly speaking, in old age, when death is approaching, we should become more and more detached. But many people become more and more attached when they get nearer and nearer to death because of the fear that they're going to lose all these things.
I was thinking about this. Everybody has the most love for oneself, and it's quite obvious now. For example, if we listen to news, or even don't have to try to listen, we get the news anyway about somebody's dying in some distant country, or there's a war somewhere. We might be for a moment like concerned and feel sadness about it, but soon we forget it because it's not so close to ourselves. But the closer it comes to ourselves, our friends, relatives, our country, then it starts concerning us more. And it comes even closer to our family, not to mention ourselves, me. Then it's very important. So even though we say we are considering and loving everybody and try to love our neighbors and all people, it doesn't really work until we know who we are, because we can't love anybody but ourselves.
Yeah. But when someone we know dies, it does have an impact on us.
Yes.
You know our friend Yaroslav.
Yes.
He was recruited in the summer.
Yeah, I heard.
And I think almost as soon as he went into action, he and his whole unit, they're missing.
Oh.
There was apparently very heavy artillery fire, and nothing has been heard of any of them since.
Oh. So that sounds horrible. I haven't.
I know him. I know that guy. That's awful.
Yeah.
Such a nice, such a gentle, sweet person.
Yes.
Really, when we hear such things, we can't help but be affected by it.
That's true. What a waste of lives and everything.
Yeah. So sad.
It's like madness, really, this whole thing.
It is. But wars have been happening from time immemorial. There's never been a time in the world when there haven't been wars. It's just, it's human nature because of greed and egotism and all these things.
We haven't learned anything, I have to admit.
It's those kind of things that make us reach towards Bhagavan, I mean, I think.
Yeah, it's said that this sorrow, grief, and misery and pain will take us closer to God, because then that's the only hope we can really.
Yeah, true. It's true.
And we have to admit we're quite helpless when it comes to whatever knowledge we seem to have.
Yes.
In the end, when death is coming, or our close friends or relatives die, we're quite helpless about it.
Yes.
And
I got a question then.
Okay, go ahead.
And I guess it's kind of along that same lines. Is that okay?
Yes.
Of course.
Am I asking too many questions? I'm the only one talking.
Oh, no. Go ahead, please.
And I studied a little bit of Frank Humphreys, just that glimpses, and I've heard this said too, that Bhagavan taught that God is look at it as like God is everything and everything is God, like absolutely everything is God, and have that perspective somehow. And I guess you're the expert on Bhagavan's teachings. Is that something that's somewhere in his teachings? Because he has so many, I mean, all the books and all the things that you've studied. I mean, so I guess that's my question. God is God, and Frank Humphrey said that Bhagavan said that all religions meet at that place, that either God is everything and everything is God. So
yes, everything is God, but God is much more than everything. We cannot limit God just as everything. God is the underlying reality. But so long as we see everything, we are not seeing God as he actually is, because God is one and indivisible. So long as we are seeing all this manyness, we are not seeing God as he actually is. God is infinite. All these many things we see are all finite. So in order to see everything as God, we need to see ourselves as God. When we see ourselves as God, we will see there's nothing other than ourselves. So all this manyness, this multiplicity, that in the Upanishads, it is said, all of this is Brahman. But Bhagavan has said, all of this is ego. In verse 26 of Ulladu Narpadu, he says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what it is giving up everything. What that means is, when he says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. The reason for that is everything, all this multiplicity, all phenomena seem to exist only in the view of ego. So only when we rise as ego, as in waking and dream, all these phenomena seem to exist. When we do not rise as ego in sleep, nothing other than ourselves seems to exist. So everything comes into existence only when ego comes into existence. And when ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Therefore, ego itself is everything. That is, when we're dreaming, we see a world full of so many objects and people and all sorts of things. But all those many things are nothing other than ourselves. We are seeing ourselves as that dream. The dreaming mind is seeing itself as the dream. So, and then he says, therefore, investigating what this is giving up everything. What this is means what ego is. If we investigate what ego is, then, as he explained in the previous verse, the nature of ego, if we investigate it, it subsides and dissolves back into its source. It ceases to exist. So when ego ceases to exist, everything will cease to exist. So in order to, this is why most of us find it difficult to investigate ourselves, because investigating ourselves means allowing ourselves to subside and everything else to subside along with us. So long as we have desires and attachments, we will be unwilling to turn our attention back towards ourselves completely, and thereby let go of everything. Let everything cease to exist. We're not willing to do that. We're still attached to this, to our identity as I am this person, and to all these other things that come along with this. We're attached to these things. That's why, in order to wean ourselves off this attachment, we need to be persistently practicing self-attentiveness. The more we practice self-attentiveness, the more our attachment for other things gets reduced, and our love to know ourselves increases. But coming back to the main point, in that verse he says, ego itself is everything. Whereas in the Upanishads they say Brahman is everything. So is Bhagavan contradicting what is said in the Upanishads? No, because when we investigate ego, we find that what ego actually is only Brahman. So the immediate substance of everything is ego. That is, it is ego that sees itself as everything else. So all other things are nothing but ego. And ego, if investigated, is nothing but Brahman. So the ultimate substance, the ultimate source and substance is Brahman. The immediate source and substance is ego. Is that clear what I'm saying? So, yes, it's true. Everything is God, but it's also equally true to say everything is ego. And to say everything is ego is more practical. Because if everything is God, then how can we get rid of everything? Because everything is causing us so much trouble.
And then the answer to that is to look within, turn around and
look within. If we
don't look
within,
at the two walls in front of you, look at what's behind you.
Yeah, exactly. If we look within, we as ego will cease to exist, and everything else will cease to exist along with us. That is the experience that God is everything, because God is the only thing. There is nothing other than God.
Then perhaps I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
Lena has a question.
Yes.
Go ahead, Lena.
Yes. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Just from me, close. Thank you very much for everything that you do.
Yeah.
And actually, I was so horrible to hear about Yaroslav.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely like, I don't know. It's so horrible. Okay. The only thing I just wanted to say that the practice of self-investigation is, I mean, what I wanted to say that this is the ego thing. It is such a subtle thing. I mean, that even though we know already that the problem is our ego, and and you said very nicely. I mean, last video that I listened with you and Ludovic from France, I think he was.
Yes.
And yes, and you were talking about basics.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I mean, for some reason, I heard clearly. I mean that this ego, it is something so subtle. You cannot catch it in any way, even though intellectually we understand these things.
Yes,
but I mean that it is very interesting trick, Maya trick, when you absolutely naturally identify yourself with something that makes this world exist, and you like something separate in this world, and it is so like. It is such a powerful, strange, strong thing.
Yes.
I mean, it is very, very. We should not. What I wanted to say, if you understand the meaning of these teachings, we should not then even think much about like what this ego, because you will never catch it. It's impossible it's impossible to grasp it with your intellect. So. The only thing is the practice, because it is melting it. It makes it like weaker. There is no other possible way to deal with this thing. No other possible way. And I believe 1,000,000% that practice given by Bhagavan is very powerful. This is my 100% I'm sure. And this is the only thing that can actually defeat ego. There is no other. So I mean that what I wanted to say that ego is something, the most difficult thing to fight with, the most difficult thing. It is like very banal and very clear thing what I'm saying, of course, but I mean that this is the very, very, very important thing. And because of this strong identity, very subtle, immediate, you cannot do anything with that. You will be suffering, you will be going through whatever and so on, but you will still be like, if you only intellectually understand, it is good if you understand, because many even don't want to like understand properly. But if you intellectually understand, it doesn't help. I mean, much. It doesn't help. This is what
that is. The understanding is essential in order to practice it.
Yes.
But the understanding by itself, without the practice, is of no use at all.
Yes.
So the understanding is necessary only for practice. Because if we don't clearly understand, but we are not any phenomena of any kind. We're not this body, we're not the mind, we're not the thoughts, we're not the desires, we're not the vasanas. We are not any of these things. We are that which knows all these things, that which is aware of all these things. That is ego. But we seem to be ego only so long as we're attending to anything other than ourselves. If we turn our attention back on ourselves, there's no such thing as ego to be found.
Yes,
That's the
but
beauty of Bhagavan's teachings.
yes, this is great, but this ego identification, it is very strong in a sense that it is so natural for us.
Yes.
We are like, it's like what can exist otherwise? Like,
Yes.
it's all, world is something, even by the way, it's interesting also, I thought that when you were talking about happiness and how we take happiness, for example, some people, they give away their lives for other people, and what do they receive? They just lose their body, actually.
Yeah.
So whatever we think to gain in a sense of happiness, it seems finally it is not even for body. I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, it is not. I mean that it is for something else,
Yes.
for something much subtler than that
Yes,
body.
Yes.
So and again, it says about something that is so subtle that we cannot even, like, we cannot control it. This controls us in a way. I mean, so
It's we who are talking are ego. That
yes,
is, the reason we cannot fight with ego is we ourselves of ego. So the only way to vanquish it is to look at it. So long as we are looking at anything else, we seem to be ego. Only when we look at ourselves, there's no such thing as ego to be found at all.
looking at ourselves means stop at all being interested in something else whatsoever.
Yes.
It's just
but
nothing.
Merely ceasing to be interested in other things is not sufficient. We need to be interested in knowing who am I. That is
yes, of course. there should be this interest. There should be this genuine interest.
Yes.
There should be. That is why we are talking about understanding. Without
passionate love to know what we actually are.
Yes, and there is this fight when you take this world with all these things, that bad and good things,
yes,
to be so real.
Mm.
I mean, you have to. I'm always like coming back to the same thing, that you have to melt this ego. You have to try to melt it. I mean, with this practice.
Yes.
Because otherwise we will be talking endlessly about this problem.
Yes,
but the thing is that you have to just deal with it, and that's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hear that, and even of course I myself and many others have thought that this self-investigation seems to be so hard, so I'll just surrender. Seems to be much easier. And I remember when I was younger, I used to think that all these yoga techniques and all these things is too much for me. I'll just surrender. But that's not been so easy so far. So,
if we can't investigate ourselves, we can't surrender ourselves. Because ultimately, the only way to surrender ourselves is to investigate ourselves.
Yes.
So long as we're attending to anything other than ourselves, we seem to be ego. So in order to surrender ego, we need to look at ourselves. We need to attend to ourselves.
Yes.
There's no other way.
Yeah, I don't think there's an ego that wants to be humble or surrender in the first place. So
no. Well, only by grace. That willingness to surrender comes only by grace. That love to surrender comes only by grace. Because the very nature of ego is to desire things other than itself. As Bhagavan says, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it grows abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. So grasping is the very nature of ego. So the only way to get rid of it is, so long as we grasp anything other than ourselves, we are just perpetuating ego. Only by trying to grasp ourselves will we get rid of this ego.
yes.
So attention inwards always.
Always. That's what Bhagavan repeatedly emphasized. Always keeping the mind on oneself alone is Atma Vichara. And he also says, until one attains one's real nature, if one holds fast to uninterrupted self-remembrance, that alone is sufficient. There again, he says uninterrupted.
Can you do that right now? I think I asked you this in another one of these meetings. Are you doing that even as you speak?
Don't look at me, look at you. Can you do it? That's the question.
Okay,
Whether others can do it or not.
I was asking myself.
if we are honest, no, we're all. I think anyone who is honest, we have to admit we are failing in this. We may be trying our best, but we are still failing. Yeah. Even trying our best is a great thing. I don't think any of us can honestly say we're trying our best, but at least we're trying a little. That's all that matters.
And also, Michael, for example, now we are talking about that. At least yes. It is also like it is also very important thing to talk about, to have someone to talk about that.
Reminds us constantly.
Yes, because again, it shows that there is some interest, which yes. is already important, and plus we have so much time to do it afterwards. So yes. we have plenty of times. Plus, sorry that I just want to continue a little bit. Again, you were talking with Ludovic. I think with him, you again, because it's last video that I watched, and you said that no efforts go in vain. I mean, they are not wasted. So this is like for Jeff also. So I mean that anyway, if your interest is there. That's enough. I mean that you will be doing it when you feel that it is okay to do it. So
yes, and we don't even have to wait for afterwards. Even while we're talking about this subject, if we're really talking about it, we should be attending to ourselves while we're talking about it. Because what are we talking about? We're talking about ourselves.
Exactly.
We're talking about, so our attention should be constantly going back to ourselves. That is reading Bhagavan's teachings, talking about Bhagavan's teachings, thinking about Bhagavan's teachings, should be constantly reminding us to attend to ourselves. So these are not separate things. These are truly useful only if they're pushing our attention back to ourselves.
Yes, exactly. It's just like that.
So it's been an hour.
And plus, can I sorry, that Michael, it is absolutely genius thing and a great thing that you always repeat it and say that it's like riding the bicycle. This is very important because it is it is for us. It is the way you are learning.
Yes,
to do
exactly.
it. You are learning. You like get acquainted. You just look around. You adjust yourself, and I mean that this is exactly like it is. Just riding bicycle. The only thing is this small thing to be interested in riding this bicycle.
Exactly.
This is the only thing. Yeah.
If someone asks us how to ride a bicycle, what can we say? You have to
get
on the bicycle and try.
Try
That's the only way of learning.
Exactly.
Words can point in the right direction. But we can never no words can adequately say what is self-investigation.
Exactly. We have so many words already. Goodness, you have millions of your videos. You million times you said already all these things. But which is great. Thank you so much, Michael. But the only small thing is left that you have to do it yourself.
You have to. Exactly.
This is the only thing. Yeah.
Yes. Only practice is missing here. Otherwise, we're doing well.
Yes. Only the essential thing is missing. And all the other inessential things are doing well.
May I ask one question about?
Yes.
Are we done? I don't have to. I mean, you've answered
some. I think we have some time left. it depends on Michael,
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah. We can go on for a little while.
I mean, to me, this whole meeting seems like grace, and Bhagavan talks about grace, I imagine. And I guess what would you say that Bhagavan says about grace?
What Bhagavan has revealed about grace is very, very important. Grace is not something other than ourselves. Grace is our own real nature. Grace is the love that we, as we actually are, have for ourselves as we actually are. That's why I was saying earlier, this love to turn within cannot come from ego, because the nature of ego is to constantly grasp things other than itself. So the love to try and grasp ourselves can come only from deep within, from what we actually are. And you said earlier about God, Guru, and grace being the same thing. They are, yes, there's this. That is, grace is the very nature of God, the very nature of Guru. Because God is love, Guru is love. That love is what we experience as grace. So we all, as Bhagavan says in that first paragraph, we all have greatest love for ourselves. But our love for ourselves is now distorted because we take ourselves to be something other than what we actually are. But underlying all this is that love for ourselves, we all love happiness. Happiness is what we actually are. So that love for happiness is itself grace, and that's what drives us on. That is, grace is infinite. It's beyond human. I mean, whatever we say about grace is we cannot capture grace in words. That's why Bhagavan often says it's beyond all understanding. But grace ultimately is the only reality.
Thank you.
It is what we ourselves actually are.
Michael, your
But
voice is a little bit distorted.
So grace is always helping us, but we need to cooperate with grace. Grace, as Bhagavan said, in the form of Guru, and Guru's teaching outwardly, it's giving us a push back within. And from within, it's pulling us within. But we need to be willing to yield ourselves to grace, because grace will never force us. So our cooperation is necessary. But ultimately, what we are cooperating with is ourselves, not with anything else. Grace is nothing other than ourselves. Everyone often said, grace is what is shining in the heart of each one of us as I am.
Michael, your voice is a little bit distorting, at least here it seems like it's a little bit distortion on it for some reason. Yes.
Okay. Has it been for long?
No, just now when you started talking, the last thing you said.
Is it still there? Is it still distorted?
No, it's gone, I think.
Oh, right.
Oh, it's normal, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, so yes, about grace, the beginning and middle and the end.
Yes, exactly.
If we think about our lives, why would we even have interest for Bhagavan's teachings or this path or any kind of spirituality?
It's only from grace. It's only grace.
Our interest has been always outward, somewhere else.
Yeah.
So,
our interest has always been outward, but we've never found satisfaction. So finally, we've come to a point that we're willing to begin to look within. We still have very strong inclination to look outwards, but we know from bitter experience of so many lives, looking outwards is not delivering the goods. We're not finding the happiness that we're seeking outside ourselves. So by grace, we are now beginning to become willing to look within.
I think one thing can help if we understand that this is a dreamer's dream. and actually it's nothing separate from oneself. Actually, it is ourself. Then the interest to the world weakens because it is in ourself already. So why should we want anything? We already have it in this sense. And it helps to weaken the interest at least a little bit.
Yes.
Go into the world and outside.
Yes.
Well, I think this was quite nice, a little bit shorter, but there's so few of us here, so I think it was very good to have you. Thank you, Michael, very much, and all the best. Can I ask, are you still living in London, by the way?
No, I don't live in London.
Okay.
For more than a year now, I've been living in Scotland.
Oh yes, okay, great. Better climate, I guess. Also.
Well, certainly a wetter climate, but it's certainly better for my health. London, where the air pollution was not good for my lung condition.
Of course, yes.
And here I'm just on the coast, so clean sea air, walking in the hills and everything is
great.
Yeah, it's conducive for.
That's good. All right. Well, maybe it's time to say thank you, Michael, and
well, thank you all. Thank you to everyone, and thank you most of all to Bhagavan, who brought us all together.
Thank you, Michael. It is not enough of you, actually, never. And I have to say that the best thing is to talk with you, just to talk with you, because it is one of the these very strong ways of maintain this interest to talk with with sages. So that is why I mean that I feel it like that. So it was really very, very rare and very great case to have again you with us. So thank you very much.
Very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having or participating. I mean, also.
Right.
Okay. So bye. See you next time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, Michael. Bye. Have a nice day. Namo Ramanaye.